Oh, well, the problem of buying a house, they're very expensive, especially in New Zealand. You simply have to increase the supply. Instead of deliberately restricting the availability of land for building, you open it up. Instead of making it difficult to get planning permission and so on, you slacken off the rules and regulations and drastically cut down the procedures. And you should be able to go in and apply for permission to build a house and tell them what you want to build, and the local authority looks at it and replies same week. And the local authority has a target. This year must increase so many new houses by the end of the year. If not, so-and-so has the right just to build them, to make up the difference. And the same applies next year. You have to come in against monopolies in the supply of materials for building houses. You've got the same firm, at least by name, selling much cheaper in Australia than the same materials in New Zealand. Well, that's simply taking advantage of the fact there's no competition in New Zealand. And it's not worth some other firm coming over from Australia to make the competition, unless the price gets even higher. So you set up the government that does provide the materials cheaper, buys the materials where they are cheaper in the world, say Australia, and passes them on to their own people at some necessary covering of cost. End of story. You make the legal costs much cheaper. You provide a government option for legal services. You don't have to use the private sector. And the government sector is organised on a non-profit basis, cost plus some reasonable, just to cover costs. If the private market can compete with it, that's fine. If it can't, fine. It's not a problem. Same with agency selling. There's always a government agency that you can use, which is not for profit. If the private sector can compete with that, well, fine. Perhaps it provides a more personal individual service. But for the bulk of the public, the state service is there at cost. Anyone could tell you can solve the housing market by increasing the supply. And most of the regulations and controls restrict supply. That's what you don't want. Is that going to solve all the economic problems? No, of course not. There's other things you can do. Get rid of income tax. Just have the GST, VAT type tax system. Tax wealth, of course, especially the transfer of wealth. And you can keep complete control of that if you have this digital currency approach that's coming in. Another advantage of it is, of course, you can track money laundering much easier. Make sure you provide a government option for mortgaging and decide how you wish to allocate mortgages in your economy. And if the private sector can compete with what you're doing, well, that's fine. And if it can't, well, that's fine too. There should be a government motor insurance option. You can always have a government policy. And it's not there for profit making. And if the private sector can compete with that, well, that's fine. And if it can't, well, that's fine too. When you see an industry is dominated by a particular firm, provide a government alternative. And if they can still provide, still also catering the market, well, that's fine. And if they can't, okay. And take away limited liability, of course. You're not limited in liability. If you own the shares, you're responsible for that company. We can sue you if the company goes bust. Your house, your car, and everything else. Makes you far more responsible in what you own shares in. Banks create money. Then banks must be owned by the state, because otherwise the private sector will control everything from the banks. Everybody knows that. The banks must be in state control. There's nothing to stop a central bank that's privately owned opening any balance it wishes. And the effect of the inflation will be, the burden of such will be carried by the economy, not the bank. Your banks must be state-controlled, state-owned. Subsidies, unemployment pay, are ridiculous. Get rid of just about all of it. Everybody receives a national wage from the tax department. If you wish to have a higher standard of living, go and work for it. There's no minimum wage out there. You want to cut a hedge for your neighbour and he's going to pay you $5 and you're willing $5 an hour to do it, to pay for your petrol money, fine, go ahead. We're not going to tax you on that income. You don't lose some of your benefit. You get your national wage for everybody. End of story. Everybody now works if they want something extra. They work at the going market price, which clears the market. Everybody that's working is willing to work for the wage that they could earn, or willing not to, and stay at home. Fine. Increase the rates. Increase the rates such that the value of land per acre or per fraction of an acre is the same throughout the country, which means rates in towns and cities are absolutely enormous, and you pay the rates whether anyone's got a business in the building or not, but the rates are according to not the building, but the value of the land. And if the land is selling for more per acre than it is elsewhere, put the rates up until the price of the land drops to the same price as elsewhere. It makes no difference to the supply of land. The location will still be there. But you don't tax the building. You don't tax the skyscraper more than you don't tax a skyscraper any more than you tax a house. You tax the land that it's on, because that won't change in supply if you tax it. And the value is only high because of the society around where the house is, if it's in a city. In other words, it's the city that's given it the value, not the owner of the land. He hasn't given it the value. The population has, in that they want it there. And that value should be owned by the society, the state. You can leave the land in private hands, but you must increase the rates such that all the land is at the same price. There's no capital gains to be made. Land doesn't sell at more than the average price. And it doesn't sell at less than that either. The government simply owns any land that people are not willing to pay the rates on. And the government doesn't, depending on what the population want, doesn't want to particularly own land. So it lowers the price so that the land is taken up. How does it lower the price of the land? Charging less rates per acre across the board. So there are many things you can do to put things better. Will this put everything right? No, of course not. But it will make big steps in the right direction. And some things will need fine-tuning, to say the least. And some things we will have got wrong. But in some sense, that's the way to go. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.
Well, it's worth adding as a note that you could tax a floor area as if it were land. Include that in your definition of land, because once a building is built, unless you tax the floor area too high, it's going to remain in existence. In other words, its supply is fixed. It's arguably not fixed at the margin because we could take the building down. It's just not profitable to own a building. Or we could sell it at the market price of land back to the state, and the state decide whether they're going to take the building down or what they're going to do with it. Because in a sense, once a building's up, it's there. Well, assuming the engineering's all right, 100 years or more, the supply is not going to be affected too much by the rates on the land, on the floor area, if you have such a tax. I'm not sure. You could think this one through, couldn't you? There's all sorts of things you can do at the margins, you see, like this. You can consider what might be the consequences and tentatively find out, life is not acting in certainty and understanding and knowing. Life is acting in what seems to be the case, likely to be, and some degree of caution, but trusting tentatively to move in what we think could be the right direction. And then it's a case of taste and see, That's the reality of life, isn't it? We'd like to live in a certain world in a sense, but we don't. And of course we may well trust that this is for a very good reason. Or you may choose not to, in which case you may find a great frustration with living. And this in itself may be so damaging it's not the way forward for you. Thank you, Heavenly Dad.